Steeltown Murders centers on the hunt to catch the killer of 3 young women in the Port Talbot area, set in both 1973 and the early 2000s. Killer Joseph Kapper went under the radar for over 30 years, until pioneering DNA evidence meant the victims finally had justice. Contrasting the policing methods of the 1970s with the forensic breakthroughs of the early noughties, Steeltown Murders is a portrait of a town dealing with the repercussions of an unsolved case 3 decades on. Ahead of the BBC series, Express. Co.uk has looked back at some of the UK's most famous serial killers. Saturday Night Strangler, Joseph Kapper. Back in 1973, 16-year-olds Geraldine Hughes and Pauline Floyd, and 15-year-old Sandra Newton were all leaving a nightclub in Swansea, South Wales. As they hitched a lift home, the 3 girls never made their destinations and were all murdered and raped in a nearby woodland by Joseph Kapper. Their disappearance sparked a massive police manhunt and left the community cowering in fear as to when or where the killer might strike again. Despite having around 150 detectives working flat out to solve the case, the early 70s meant there were no mobile phones, internet or computers. Because of the way the girls were murdered, police put up posters warning people that thumb lifts have led to murder and urged them not to do it. Kapper earned his nickname after attacking on Saturdays, and at times it seemed as though he would never be caught. However, the girls' underwear had been sent to a forensics lab and kept intact, and with the emergence of more sophisticated genetic testing methods, their items could finally be tested. Despite the DNA failing to materialize, it meant there was enough for the murder investigation, which was dubbed Operation Magnum, back up and running in 2000. With the help of a psychological profiler, their suspect list consisted of 353 men, before whittling it down to 147 before a nightclub bouncer from Port Talbot called Joseph Kapper was finally interviewed. Had initially been quizzed at the time of the deaths but somehow slid under the radar despite driving the same model of car spotted on the night in question, a white Austin 1100. However, they faced yet another issue of Joseph being dead for 12 years, which left it down to Kapper's NRS ex-wife and her daughter to volunteer swabs of their DNA. Kapper's body was exhumed in 2002, where DNA was taken from his femur and teeth, proving a full match, meaning justice had finally been served. Don't miss. Rylan forced to step in as Alicia Dixon makes Eurovision blunder live on air. Latest, Eurovision fans left stunned over Hannah Waddingham's appearance. Watch, Ukrainian President Zelensky banned from delivering Eurovision video message. Insight, The Morris Murders, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Pauline Reed, 16, John Kilbride, 12, Keith Bennett, 12, Leslie Ann Downey, 10, and Edward Evans, 17, were the 5 victims of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Ian and Myra first met in 1961, where Ian quickly convinced Myra that there was no God and soon revealed the dark thoughts he was having. Being persuaded and blinded by her infatuation, Myra soon accompanied Ian, and the pair carried out their murders between 1963 and 1965. Pauline Reed was on her way to a disco near her home in Manchester when she was taken and killed by Ian. It was 2 decades before her parents were informed of what happened to her, with her body being found in 1987. 4 months after, John Kilbride was lured onto the moor where he was sexually assaulted and murdered. Keith Bennett was their 3rd victim, after being abducted from his home, but his body has never been recovered as both Ian and Myra refuse to reveal where they have buried him. Leslie Ann Downey was the couple's youngest victim, being lured away from a fairground on Boxing Day, to the house where Myra lived at the time. Ian sexually abused and tortured her, forcing her to pose for sexually explicit photographs. Taking this kill one step further, the murderers recorded an audio tape of her brutal final moments that reduced a courtroom to tears when it was played back. Edward Evans was the final victim and was an apprentice engineer who was lured to a home then shared by Hindley and Brady. Ian and Myra's crimes were exposed after Myra's brother-in-law, David Smith, called the police after being lured to move the body under false pretenses. In 1966 both Hindley and Brady were jailed for life for the murders, with Myra dying in 2002 and Ian in 2017. Fred and Rose West married couple. Fred and Rose West preyed on and killed 10 young women in order to play out sexual fantasies. The couple married in 1972 when Rose was 18, however, the pair had been having an affair with one another for 3 years, whilst Fred was married to his first wife Catherine Costello. At the time their relationship began, Catherine was 18 and pregnant with another man's child, but Fred stepped up and became the child's father. She gave birth to their daughter Charmaine in 1963 and Anne-Marie in 1994, however, she eventually left him in 1969, with West later admitting to her murder in 1994. Anne McFall was West's first documented victim, in 1967 after she became the nanny for West's children but was also sleeping with Fred. She died not long after, pregnant with his child. Her remains, and that of her unborn baby, were found in a field at Kempley, near West's home village of Muchmarkle, in Herefordshire, in June 1994. There are 12 known victims of the couples, with them both being charged for 10 murders and Fred a further 2. Rose murdered Charmaine when she was just 8 after Fred was in prison for the theft of car tires and a vehicle tax disc in 1971. The remains of Linda Goff, 19, Carol Ann Cooper, 15, Lucy Partington, 21, Teresa Genthiler, 21, Shirley Hubbard, 15, Juanita Mott, 18, Shirley Ann Robinson, 18, and Allison Chambers, 17, were all found buried at their Cromwell Street home in the city. Their daughter Heather, 16, was also found dead at their home after her parents never reported her missing. The couple's crimes were found out after Detective Con Hazel Savage overheard West's family joke about Heather being under the patio. Savage managed to convince his senior officers that he didn't think West was joking and eventually organized a search of Cromwell Street. West eventually admitted to murdering his daughter in 1994, leaving the police's further investigation of the House of Horrors. Police officers found the bodies of 9 girls and young women. West hung himself in his cell in 1995, just before facing his trial, leaving Rose to go through the courts alone. Rose became one of the most notorious female mass killers in Britain when she was jailed that year and still remains in prison to this day. The Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe. Peter Sutcliffe terrorised Yorkshire in the 1970s and 1980s and killed at least 13 women and attacked many more. He was named the Yorkshire Ripper by the press as his notoriety grew in the late 1970s, with the police encouraging women to stay home at night. Peter's first known murder took place in 1975 when he killed mother of 4 Wilma McCann, who was 28 at the time. The serial killer then went on a spree and killed Emily Jackson in 1976, Irene Richardson in 1977, Patricia Tina Atkinson in 1977, Jane MacDonald in 1977, and Jean Jordan in 1977. Then in 1978 Yvonne Pearson, Helen Reitka, and Vera Millward. In 1979 Josephine Whitaker and Barbara Leach, and Marguerite Walls and Jacqueline Hill in 1980. Peter was eventually arrested in 1981 after police initially stopped him in a car with a sex worker and was found to have fake plates. Soon after his arrest police discovered a knife, hammer and rope at the scene that he had managed to discard. After a grueling 2 days of intensive questioning, Peter admitted he was the Ripper, but later pleaded not guilty to 13 charges of murder, but guilty to manslaughter on the basis of diminished responsibility. He claimed God had told him to murder his victims, and 4 psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia but was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment. Peter recently died of COVID-19 in 2020 and claimed "I'm not going to make it, I won't be returning, I'm sorry, I'm ready to go," as he struggled to breathe before his death. Steeltown Murders begins at 9 p.m. on Monday 15th of May on BBC One, with all episodes then available on BBC iPlayer.